significant shift around the way that we share our gifts and also the way that we make money as we're moving into 2027. We can see this already. So the cross of the planning is all about bargains. And we can see this in governments, we can see this in the family unit, we can see this in the health systems. There are so many structures that are present right now that are contingent upon you do this for me, I do this for you, as like a tribe, a group, a collective. And as we move into the Sleeping Phoenix, it's going to be more about how the individual being in their own uniqueness is able to mutually support the tribe or the group. And so it's going away from these larger systems of collective, conditioning or routine that we've been so a part of as individuals, but just on this macro scale, to more like, okay, what is our unique way of doing this thing? What is our unique contribution? What innovation has one person or a small startup or something thought of that's going to support a future trajectory? And so, yeah, like I said, we can see this already with like the amount of people having startups or small businesses or just like social media, starting podcasts. Like there are all these other ways that the individual is contributing to the whole and then also receiving from that. And
able to do so outside of a traditional system.
Yes, exactly. And so with this shift too, we can kind of see, I'm being conscious of the words that I'm using, but not necessarily the dissolution, but the potential dissolution of some of these systems and the way that they're maybe not as sustainable as they were 50, 60, 100 years ago.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Be the Vessel podcast. My name is Daniel and I play the roles of channeler and intuitive psychologist, aiming to bridge all aspects of the healing arts while navigating my return journey to the stars. I interview those journeying through all aspects of healing, whether that be from more traditional Western frames or from a more spiritual or spirit-based connection. What I always find is that everyone is a bridge between worlds, a universe unto themselves, and a unique light that shines brightly for the collective. If you like what you hear and are interested in more of my offerings, consider joining the Be the Vessel community at patreon.com/Dr. Daniel Atkins, where you will find various unique offerings, bonus content, and podcasts such as my own channeled information and the new Be the Vessel healing series. May you find what you're looking for and remember the light within. And lastly, the views in this episode do not represent my personal views, nor are they to be taken as medical advice or scientific fact. Always do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and trust your own guidance. Trishana Suman is an empowerment guide and mentor. She has delved into diverse spiritual practices, including studying under shamans in Peru and California, exploring the Chakra System, learning Tantric and Taoist techniques, and using human design and gene keys to understand her unique path while supporting others in understanding their own. With over 5 years of experience in providing personalized guidance to clients, Trishana's path is one of supporting and guiding others along their spiritual and human journey. Alongside her spiritual journey, she has also dedicated over a decade to government service and now supports conscious businesses through SEO marketing. I welcome Trishana back for our third episode in the exploration of all things human design. In our third installment, we explore deeper themes of the 6-2 profile and the implications of shifting Earth's background frequency from a 1-line into a 6-line beginning in 2027. To hear more about Trishana's personal journey, as well as more foundational concepts of human design, check out episodes 53 and 54. To discover more about Trishana and her offerings, follow her at LightRay on Instagram or visit sacredtransmutation.com. Please enjoy my latest conversation with Trishana Suman, and may you receive the call to step forth in authenticity and truth for the long-awaited shift into 2027 and beyond. Hi, Trishana.
Hi,
So
Dan.
happy to have you back here. It's felt like a journey since our last time on the screen, and here for our long awaited, at least between the two of us. I don't know if anyone else is waiting, but we've been waiting for
Yeah.
this third installment of our human design journey together. And we've been talking for a while, even since the beginning, like, hinting at some of the bigger global shifts around 2027, and some of that, you know, what feels like to me more of like the mythology and the larger story, and the exciting stuff. But there's, like when we started, there's so much to human design, from the incredibly meticulously detailed to the larger um, epoch scope of it all. And yeah, I'm excited that we're here after a few hours in the bank of going through the details of it. And we could
Yeah.
keep doing that, but
Yeah, totally.
it's nice that we get to dive into a little bit of that stuff that we've been planting seeds around. So I know that we always can get into such a deep flow, and as I just mentioned to you, I have some notes, but I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you sort of lead us off, and open the gates, so to speak,
Cool.
to see where we go.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you again for your patience and also your reminder of like the divine timing of things, which I so needed, which brought us to this moment. Also interesting to note, you mentioned earlier how Jupiter is conjunct your Venus and my sun right now, and so it just feels like this extra cosmic, like
Very,
teacher guidance, solar alignment.
very divinely timed, and through
Yeah.
the Mercury retrograde, like I don't know exactly, but I know it's coming out of the shadow period, like just now, or something like that. So um yeah, a lot of alignment, I think, in bringing us, and some new moon energy, bringing us into another eclipse season. So all divinely timed.
Yeah, sweet. So the first thing that comes to mind to share, and it's two things, and I kind of see it like um, two parts of like a giant trunk of a tree, and I imagine there are two branches going out either way, and the branches will probably find themselves connecting. And the two things primarily are 2027, and then the sixth line, which I'd love to talk some more about the 6-2 stuff as well and get into the details of that since we're both 6-2s. And it
Right.
just seems like it's been so interesting. I have so many more 6-2s coming into my life as of late too, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
Um, but one really big thing about 2027, which, if you are unfamiliar, it represents a significant shift in the precession of the equinoxes. So in the precession of the equinoxes, it takes 26,000 years for a complete cycle. And essentially, that means the way that the Earth rotates on its axis. So it's, let's say, here now, and it goes westward. So in 26,000 years, it'll make a cycle. And so within this cycle, there are mini cycles happening. And one significant mini cycle that we're ending and beginning is happening in 2027. And this is about a like approximately 416-year cycle. It was the early 1600s that we went into the new cycle. And so this new cycle, or early 1600s that we went into the current cycle, and this new cycle that we're going into 2027 is starting with a sixth line. And so we can kind of see this happening already. We're moving out of our first line, and the first line is about the investigator. It's about creating the foundation. It's also very science based, which is
Mm,
interesting to look
makes
at.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So it's about really getting down into the nitty gritty, into the details to discover. Um, and in 2027, we're going to the sixth line, which is about seeing the higher perspective. There's also, or there can be like a detachedness or an aloofness to it, but it's something more that comes from objectivity rather than having to be in the super duper weeds of the thing. And one really interesting thing about this new cycle that we're going into, which I personally really love because I'm biased and I'm a sixth line, is that for the sixth line beings, so this means if you're a 6-2, if you're a 4-6, if you're a 6-3, and then a 3-6, it's gonna be your time. You're gonna feel like, well, the way that I interpret it is like there's going to be a greater sense of belonging collectively. Because these cycles that I'm talking about all have to do with what's called the background frequency of this program. So you can kind of just think of it as like the metaphor of us being in the matrix. But actually, it's not the one like we see in the movie, but there is some sort of divine algorithm that we're a part of. And
So not so nefarious as
yes,
we see in the movie.
yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. But it's like the background frequency of this program is going to be in this sixth line energy to where the sixth line beings are really going to feel like they're coming into their time. And I don't know about you, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, but it definitely does feel like, I guess the more that I've learned to know myself, especially the past like 5 to 7 years, I definitely feel a lot more like black sheep energy as I come into that full ownership of self. And a lot of other six line beings, particularly 6-2s that I've spoken to, have felt this way. And so it feels refreshing to think about the idea of us being, or us and then collectively being in a time and place where we're going to feel like who we are and our expression and what we're here to offer is a lot more in alignment with what's happening in the external world.
Yeah, I will. I wanted to say, like, it's the time of the black sheep, right? It's like, speaking personally, and what I know about the 6-2 is like, I'd say, at least I've definitely been a late bloomer in my life, and that might be
Totally,
like
me
a
too.
6-2 theme.
Mm-hmm.
I think being a late bloomer and then maybe like stepping on every landmine that is available for us to step on in life. I've
Yeah.
I've hit every one. I don't know if I've missed any yet. And just getting blown up and still
Yeah.
and getting and surviving. And there's resilience to that. Just getting blown up, getting hit, getting badgered, batted around, and like, yeah, just having to learn a lot of lessons. And I think for the late bloomer aspect, there's like the comparison game that we can play of our lives
Mm-hmm.
not looking
Totally.
like other non-6-2s lives. And
Yeah.
but having a higher perspective, and trusting, especially if you're open to some kind of spiritual path, um, that there is something here for us. There is some destiny, some dharma, for us to walk. We didn't just get. I mean, I think for me at least, it has felt like for thus far in my life, it's like we just got thrown onto this planet, and it's like we're not. I don't know how to connect to this world. I don't. This isn't even
Mm-hmm.
my world. Why am I here? I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I am supposed to be here. But
Yeah.
kind of like you're saying, maybe the world is now catching up to us, not in a judgmental sense that better or worse, just like
Mm-hmm.
the place that we're at, and what we have to give, the earth may be shifting into an alignment with to receive from us. And I kind of feel like I may always have a little bit of disruptor energy, but I think maybe that it's been pretty harsh, the energy I've given off, and
Mm-hmm.
pretty tense and challenging, and maybe the poles shifting or whatever it is, may create a little more accessibility and frequency for us to step into the leadership roles that we actually came here to play and to be received, or even needed a bit more, than we have
Mm-hmm.
been thus far.
Totally. Yeah, no, I so appreciate you sharing all of that. As you were saying that too, there are so many other layers of this that I want to share with you. And you made such a great point about the landmines thing, because it's like for the 6-2 from 0 to 30, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode too. Uh, that's what it's about. It's about stepping on those landmines. It's about the trial and error. But one really beautiful thing about going on the roof, which happens with everyone's first Saturn return, right? So like 28 to 30, depending on when your Saturn return is that we're done with that trial and error phase for the most part. And we're able to take that time to kind of step away from doing what we think needs to be done or trying to be so in it for the trial and error. And that's when we learn to become objective. And through that objectivity, through that knowing what works and what doesn't, people will seek the 6-2 out for guidance, for insight, for advice, whatever it might be, to help them to see what works and what doesn't work. And so, a couple things. I guess the first thing is that trust is a big thing for the 6-2, and it's not like necessarily just like a subjective trust of having an expectation and it not being met. It's the ability to recognize patterns in the world, in people, in habits and behaviors and whatever it is. And then through that pattern recognition, being able to, with objectivity, determine what works and what doesn't. And so it's said, like, if someone brings something to the 6-2 and we feel like it's not going to work, we can kind of foresee that based off of what is provided to us. And so similarly, too, it's like a 6-2 won't get into anything if we can see it's not going to work, because it's like, what's the point? And so like 30 to 50 is a lot of this. It's about us learning from the first 30 years and then really getting clear on who we are, like on a very deep embodied level that is separate. And so this is like a very common theme for the line 6. It's separate from everyone and everything else, which is okay. And through this separateness, we're still able to be the role model by default. But it's not the role model that we think we should be based off of the perfection that we perceive around us. This is a really big thing from 0 to 30, right? It's like trying to do all the things to prove ourselves or to whatever checklist thing, whatever that could look so different for different people, but it's like trying to be what we think we should be rather than really continuing to tune into ourselves and learn from the trial and error and know for ourselves, which is beyond what anyone else can tell us about us, know for ourselves who we are. And then through that place, like I said, by default, being a role model. And to respond to something else you mentioned, according to this framework, we really come into our prime at 50.
Right, yeah.
So like right now, we're just like doing our thing.
Yeah, we're still developing. We're still developing.
Yeah, totally. Which is kind of like amazing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
I'm cool with that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Still maturing. Yeah,
totally. And it's like really being able to fully embody wisdom and insight from 30 to 50 at that age. And waiting for the right call. That's a really big 6-2 theme as well, is knowing through your own awareness of what feels correct for you and what feels like a yes for you, being aware of what the right call is. Because that's really when, I don't want to say like our gifts can shine, but that's really when we'll feel a deep sense of purpose and satisfaction.
Yeah. And a few things that come up for me as you're speaking. It's like, yes, waiting for the call. And it's like, there's so much trial and error, right? Because one thing that was coming up for me is the intellect versus, in human design, there's a lot of specific language, but I would maybe generally we'll call it, I guess, maybe the gut response or the sacral response or the body response or the bodily intuition. Because at least for me, probably for many of us, and this may have to do with that whole science-based chapter, is that we're all so addicted to mind, and mind is so privileged, the intellectual mind, the conscious thinking mind. And for me, that was, I grew attached to that. It wasn't always, it has not always been a pleasant place for me, but it's been a familiar place. And then with my clinical training and professional identity, the idea was, oh, this is how I serve the world. This is what people need from me. This is my role modeling, is the intellect. And the longer I've been on this journey, especially the past few years, it's like, actually, I'm starting to feel like that has very little to do with this, that there's other aspects of mind opening, higher mind, lower mind, intuitive capacities, emotional resonance, feeling my way through the world. I know that part of the 2027 shift is shifting into that solar plexus, intelligence, letting that lead, and starting to realize maybe that's the way I'm leading, through that kind of wisdom, through that cultivation, that hard-earned cultivation of wisdom, because that comes with a lot of trial and error and a lot of thinking about what's right, and realizing it's wrong, realizing I don't know anything, and it's maybe not even about right or wrong. It's just about experiencing and finding my way through every moment. So that's what came up for me around, that this long maturation process and detachment and letting go of those aspects of my personal identity, and maybe collectively, that we've been holding on to as, the aspect of us that seems to be most important, that teaches ourselves and other people things, and seems to know, quote unquote, know what's right, even though it doesn't know anything, really. And that the other piece I'll add to that is maybe part of that sort of curation and cultivation period is that gut response, that bodily, intuitive, and sacral knowing space gets really developed in order to know when the call arrives. Because for so long, it's like, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that.
Yeah.
And it's
all
like,
mind, right?
and it just gets totally like sharpened over and over again, so that we can be so present focused and wise through experience, that when the call comes, we know. And it's like, oh. And that level of discernment, just, I think, maybe is just part of maybe all of ours, but especially ours personally, in how we're meant to begin navigating the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Very well said too. And like, to reflect what you said in relation to the 6-2, one of the things about the 6-2 is that we can at times, especially in the earlier years, the trial and error, and as we're going onto the roof, figuring ourselves out in life, we can be hypocrites.
Totally.
So it's like, like, do as I say, but not as I do. But there is something about what you're alluding to, is like the embodied wisdom and leading from that actual example. And you know what this reminds me of? Like, it reminds me of shamans, or like some medicine people, or even some like gurus, just people who have just reached a very high level of awareness of their own experience of themselves and other people in this matrix reality. There's almost like a transmission that's being passed on just from being around them. And it's not something that's always conscious. It's not something that's always communicated. It can just be from being in someone's field. And I think we all experience this with different people in different ways. But there is something about the 6-2 coming off the roof, really not just being able to, but having to. It's almost like, if you look at it from this karmic and dharmic perspective, we don't have a choice to come off the roof. I mean, we can try not to, but life will pull us off the roof to come down and share through embodiment and being everything that we've learned and experienced, and I guess the truth of who we are that we've accumulated from 30 to 50. And separate, but also related to what you mentioned earlier, we are moving into a mutation of the solar plexus, where it's going from what is considered in human design as a motor. So the motor is kind of like something that creates pressure to act, or to get things done. It's going from that to more of an awareness center. And so it's going to change the way that us as individuals, but also the collective relates to the emotional frequency, to the texture of emotions. And particularly people who are emotionally defined, like you and I, we kind of set the energetic emotional tone for people in our auras. And so this is something I really have to be conscious of as well with my grandma and my mom. They're both emotionally undefined. So I know if I'm walking to the kitchen and I'm feeling like this, whatever tension or whatever, whether they're aware of it or not, they can feel it. And so I just think of this on a collective level too. If we look at like just the world right now and just the huge spectrum of emotional charge, also being fed to, I think it's like the other 50%. I'm not sure exactly what percentage, but I believe it's 50% of people are emotionally defined. The other 50% who aren't emotionally defined, who are just unconsciously feeling the emotional energy and or projecting the emotional energy. And so as emotional beings, I definitely feel more of a responsibility for awareness. And this doesn't mean that we can't feel things. I mean, I have like the 636, 3536 crisis opportunity. It's like I know that these waves, these very intense waves, are always going to be a part of my reality. And this is also why human design has supported me so much to realize like, oh no, there isn't something wrong with being emotional. I don't need to numb it. This is part of my process and this is how I learn, right? It's from my perspective, it's like a form of intelligence almost that helps me recognize where I'm at or where someone else is. And just there's an emotional wisdom and also a capacity for compassion that I feel like comes with that. I was digressing a little bit, but the point I'm making is the responsibility of uh, not not feeling our emotions or repressing our emotions, but it's almost like in the moment being aware of how this higher self, I don't know if you want to call it that, is relating to that, to the emotional body uh, in real time, and being able to, the term that was coming to me was like check it, but I don't want to check it, just in being able to hold it with love and understanding what that means from an embodied perspective rather than just going off the wall because of this intense emotional field. So 2027 is going to bring that particular shift in the collective. And this is what I was mentioning earlier too, which is interesting. When we think about the shift of the background frequency, we're moving from the cross of planning to the cross of the sleeping phoenix. And you have the 5559 in the chart, and I have the 5354. And so one of the main themes that we're moving into collectively is actually the 55.6, which I think you have in your conscious earth. So
Yeah.
you have the 59.6, yeah, and conscious earth. Um, and that the 55 is all about, is the cup half empty or half full? There's this theme of really trying to find the essence of abundance and fulfillment, even amongst what can seem like it's not there, or what can seem like it's not available. And it's like also a shift of a mood and of an energy. And sometimes it can be something that provokes us to do more, or try to look for the experiences that will bring more fulfillment or will provide that feeling of that cup that is almost like always full, which I know is not realistic. Um,
In one sense, in a higher sense, but in the physical realm and in the emotional body, it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. No, I love that reflection of that. And I feel like the higher expression of this energy is finding the awareness of that in between those things, like acknowledging the physical reality and what is present here and what may feel lacking, but being able to find like the spirit.
It reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the initiation of the shaman, right? And I'm not sure if it's the case for all 6-2s, but I think certainly for me and for you, like you were saying, like part of our work, it feels like, is to cleanse and to purify the self. And that whenever I use that word, I always worry that it sounds like moral or something, but it's not that way at all. It's just, it's
Yeah.
neutral, it's energetic. It's to work with these emotions, which are dense and heavy, and a lot of them are painful, and they and they're biased, and they're not truth. So I think we came here, especially those of us with intense emotional authorities and waves, like to cleanse and to walk the walk, like you said, mentioning the hypocrisy aspect of it. Like maybe we always came here able to talk the talk, but but part of the experience is walking the walk. And I can say that for myself, that a lot of what I've been speaking to, even from a young age, I've had to go through. And it's humbling. It's humbling. And to that point, holding the higher, that's to me what has guided me through this, some of the depths of the really emotionally painful times, particularly recently, is the opening and purifying of the channel to a higher perspective. Because, if everything's going well, it's easy to have a quote unquote higher perspective. And if it's like, oh yeah, I can believe in spirit and the blessings of a spiritual realm because everything in my physical realm is going great. So why would I even have to question it? But it's when things really hit the fan, and it's like, and then you are asked to surrender. And for me, I hear my guides, and I can feel that, not every day necessarily, but the faith has been strengthened to ride the waves. And I feel that is a deep part of the initiation, in order to balance both a spiritual dimension and an earthly dimension, and to balance a higher knowing with the emotional body, which is not to be discounted as like childish or immature or false. It's just a different level of truth. It's a very personal, in the moment, reactive, conditioned level of truth that needs attention. But if we can balance that with a higher perspective, I think it allows us to be that caregiver for ourselves that we need to be in order to serve in the way we're being asked to serve.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I've learned to also see that emotional awareness sometimes as guidance too, So sometimes it can be unnecessarily reactive, of course. And at other times it tells us when something isn't healthy for us or we need to pivot. And so when I think about us being in this matrix from a greater perspective, and this is the thing about emotional authority, right? It's like low end of our wave, we'll feel it. High end of our wave, we'll feel it. And then when we're at a homeostatic place on our wave, we'll know based off of what we experience in the other two what is correct for us. And this correctness will take us down a certain path and change our trajectory. And so it's also surrendering to what we can't control about it, even if the mind wants something different to happen, which is such a big thing for everyone, right? Like we envision what life should look like or where we should be, when there's always some sort of greater intelligence at work and at play. Yeah. Another thing that's coming to mind right now too, in regards to the 55.6 from a more collective perspective, and this is really interesting too, and I think about how this relates to AI, is that one of the keynotes for the 55.6 is finding spiritualism through materialism. Yeah. So, which, like I said, it kind of reminds me of not what we're directly doing with AI, but there is something about being able to find a form of consciousness or mind through form. And so I also wonder how this would manifest in just the way that we deal with money and our material possessions and things too. Or even like, I don't want to use the word worship, but maybe even the worship of things that aren't just spiritual or aren't of the mind, but are more tangible and related to what I think of when I say this is like Venusian energy. It's like the energy of Venus and the material.
Yeah.
And just the way that we'll deal differently with money or what we give value to, even on a spiritual level, which is really interesting to think about. It's so the opposite of kind of what we've been taught from traditional spirituality.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of that. Like and who knows what's going to happen, right? But I've heard some, and even some, specifically some in the human design tradition, speak about part of this shift being maybe there is an increase in natural disasters or things that maybe strip us down a bit more in terms of the material or the technological, while at the same time, when we look at our world, there's such an amplifying and increasing, space in AI and other kinds of things. But, there's so many ways to look at it. Like maybe that increase, that Uranus and Gemini, that electricity, maybe that's more in the, in the innate mental aspects of our being, like the telepathy tapes and the telepathic communication. Maybe that's what really comes online, which is mirrored by AI. Maybe, I think I just heard someone else speaking to this. Maybe a lot of what is getting ramped up, and we see, and maybe this is to your point, the connection between the spirit and the material. Maybe what we see getting ramped up, technology-wise, material-wise, is really just there to mirror back our own gifts, our own gifting, the AI of our brains, of our what we can do. And I've also heard others speak to the idea that AI, if treated well, can ultimately just reflect back our own higher guidance, and reflect back to us, that consciousness. And so maybe we can see through, reflected back in the robot or whatever, our own divinity and the brilliance of our own human machine and design and consciousness, not so that we just like give our power away to what develops, materially or technologically, but so we allow it to reflect back, that we are these God-given machines with immense power. And whether that technology amplifies, whether it goes offline, whether natural disasters hit and we have to pivot or whatever, we recognize that we are the gift, we are the technology, so to speak.
We are the technology.
Yeah. So, those themes have come up for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you make a great point. There is a significant shift around the way that we share our gifts and also the way that we make money as we're moving into 2027. We can see this already. So the cross of the planning is all about bargains. And we can see this in governments. We can see this in the family unit. We can see this in the health systems. There are so many structures that are present right now that are contingent upon you do this for me, I do this for you, as like a tribe, a group, a collective. And as we move into the sleeping phoenix, it's going to be more about how the individual being in their own uniqueness is able to mutually support the tribe or the group. And so it's going away from these larger systems of collective, conditioning or routine that we've been so a part of as individuals, but just on this macro scale, to more like, okay, what is our unique way of doing this thing? What is our unique contribution? What innovation has one person or a small startup or something thought of that's going to support the future trajectory? And so, like I said, we can see this already with like the amount of people having startups or small businesses or just like social media, starting podcasts. Like there are all these other ways that the individual is contributing to the whole and then also receiving from that. And
able to do so outside of a traditional system.
Yes, exactly. And so with this shift too, we can kind of see I'm being conscious of the words that I'm using, but not necessarily the dissolution, but the potential dissolution of some of these systems and the way that they're maybe not as sustainable as they were 50, 60, 100 years ago. And I mean, we can think of the many reasons, but it just seems like this energetic shift of a ripple effect towards something else. And what's interesting too, when you were talking about the natural disasters and just the no, the almost like calamities that happen that require people, sometimes force people to kind of reassess and recalibrate how they're living lives. And
Right.
we can experience it on a micro level, but just on a larger global level, like I feel like that's what COVID was on such a big level. And
It's like
so,
one way of seeing it is like for those of us who are guided to awaken on a spiritual path, it's like I'll speak for the two of us. Like it's not necessarily a choice. It's like
I
this
know.
is the way. There is no other functional way for
Yeah.
you to be in this world. But then for others who maybe have an easier time or easier attachment to the physical world, it's like
Uh-huh.
those kinds of natural disasters, those are for them a kind of a forced awakening and reckoning with
Yeah.
like, okay, this is now happening for everyone. And so you're either going, you don't, you speaking to others will not necessarily have it. And then, everyone may still play out their journeys in the ways that they're designed to in their path. But I feel some of whatever the shifts the earth is meant to go through are there to, you know, awaken everyone to potential higher perspectives and release attachments to things that are no longer meant to serve us.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love you saying that because this is what the 6-2 is all about too. It's like we can't help but see the perspective that we see. The six lines, the top of the hexagram. They say it like often times ahead of their time. And it's not even like a superiority, inferiority. It's like has nothing to do with that. It's just the scope of vision. And so 6-2s being able to see, and like you said, it's like we don't have a choice. It's like we can't not see it. But there are some people who can very easily not see it until it's directly in front of them. And
Right.
then they're like, oh, then they can't not see it,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's like one thing I love about this, the way that human design categorizes this is like transpersonal karma versus personal karma. So there are four profile lines, or excuse me, profile numbers. 6-2 is one of those numbers that is transpersonal, meaning we do require other people in order to fulfill our karmic purpose. Personal profile people, personal karma people, hypothetically, can sit on a mountain and fulfill their purpose. And so there is something that I've noticed about the 6-2s in my life too, where it's like there's an ability to care more about things that are beyond what they can just see. And of course, there are people amongst all profile numbers, I'm sure, that feel like that. But generally, it is the 6-2s and some of these other profile lines that just have more of a natural state of awareness of these things rather than other people who, like you said, that it would need to be at their doorstep for it to be like, oh, okay, this is a thing now.
And it also reminds me of that idea of like the detachment and the aloofness. Like there can be, and this is very personal to me, a sense of like separateness from people. Like, I can be a very intimate, warm, charismatic person and be very deep in relationships. But a lot of like my daily life and what I need for myself includes like a lot of space from people. And it also it's just natural to see some of like a higher perspective or like humanity as a whole or the universe as a
Yeah.
whole or beyond, right? It's just like, and maybe that has to do with that idea of transpersonal karma and the way that we serve, like maybe the way that I serve humanity, whether it's on an individual one-on-one basis or groups or not, there's always that higher perspective of serving something larger than myself, than any
Mm-hmm.
individual
Mm-hmm.
person, and that getting caught up in the nitty-gritty of individual relationship stuff isn't always aligned.
Yeah.
And that the service, is best when it comes from that higher place.
Yeah. I think there's also a separateness, like you said, from that. Some of the human drama stuff, because we're like, okay, we've seen for the most part, we've seen and learned what doesn't work. So why keep repeating it? And why keep doing it? And then also being able to see that and like loved ones or the people around us, it's kind of like, if you can't see me on the screen right now, I'm just doing a shrug. I'm doing like the shrug emoji. It's just like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What are people doing? And there is that ability to see that. And this is I guess the privilege of that's the right word, of the sixth line, being able to be on top of the hexagram with the ability to see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this higher scope and this higher vision allows for that fuller, all-encompassing perspective, where maybe not everyone has access to that naturally. And this is also why it's important for the 6-2 to stay objective. And one really key thing, which has resonated with me and stuck with me, and this also is connected to something you mentioned earlier in the call too, is that a negative role model can still be a role model. And this is such a big thing for the 6-2, acknowledging if it's going into cynicism, which is very common from 0 to 30, considering all the landmines. And then from that acknowledgement of it, which happens when we're on the roof, going into more of this optimistic idealist perspective. Because we're also contributing to, even though we're this tiny microcosm, we're contributing to the ripple effect of what's happening in the world, even if it's just directly the people around us. And so when we're being that negative role model, that's also still role modeling. And so I think there's something about the 6-2 as well. The quote that comes to mind is like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Which can be really hard to remember when we're in our trip and we're in the low of our wave or what have you. And I think this is also a reflection, if you will, on the energy that we'll be moving into in 2020, and also particularly people who have certain definitions, like your incarnation cross, my
2027, you
incarnation
mean?
cross. Or I'm sorry, yes, thank you, 2027. Yeah, thank you. Especially if you already have some of these background frequency gates in your design, which you do, I do. It's kind of like more of a responsibility, or those aspects of us are going to be more prominent during that time. And so being a lot more conscious of how that energy, that expression, especially how it's related to the emotional authority, is being shared with the world.
I'll share a personal example of that, which is that, I have felt for a long time that, like, yes, and my energy really impacts people and my words, and I have to be discerning with my words. And I have friends, and I see people in the world, even like on group chats of mine, where some people are just more consistently negative or sort of let their reactive emotions just play out, and it's okay, and it works for them. Internally, it's still going to create issues, right? If that's how they're moving through the world. But in terms of the relational aspect, like, other people just kind of like go with the flow of it. Oh, that's John being John. He's just letting it. It doesn't really sync the group, and it doesn't like, and it blows over, and no one sees them any less the wiser. But for me, when I lean into my cynical, negative, sarcastic side, which I can do from time to time, I see the impacts of that are so much more monumental, and people are like, "Whoa, what's wrong with Dan? Like, something this doesn't feel good at all." And everyone sinks, and the whole ship is sinking, and I'm like, "Wow, I need to watch." And for a while, I felt like this isn't fair. Like, why does everyone else just get to, let their emotions fly? And I'm just like, well, that's just not the way it is for me. And there are blessings to that too, because the role model aspect kicks into high gear when I'm able to hold some level of neutrality or integrity, or just work with my feelings privately without, sharing them all the time, which is very relevant to our current, social media state, which is, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a comment. And, for me, staying off of that, staying off of social media, not letting every comment of mine, be available for the world to see, that
Yeah.
feels more aligned for me. Whereas I'm not sure if it's aligned for anyone in particular, but
Yeah.
but it may work for others where they can just let
Yeah.
their opinions and feelings fly on the internet and it doesn't sink the ship. But for me, I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, there is whether it's responsibility or just like my design, it doesn't work as
Yeah.
well.
Totally. One of the things about the 6-2, and this goes back to what I was saying about being able to be an objective source of wisdom, is that people by default, because they know that it takes what it perceives seriously, they'll take it what it says seriously as well. And so also in the same token, like the 6-2 won't be the person that enables the friend or the family member if they're doing something toxic. So sometimes people will. It's like you said, oh, that's just them, or that's just. But if you know, for example, someone's doing something to hurt themselves or something, like the 6-2, when they're being their true selves, they're not going to be the person that lets that fly because they can see what's going to be the best, like the highest outcome for everyone involved. And I think whether people are conscious of it or not, they can kind of see that reflected. And like you said, it
And
is
I think that
from,
can be triggering for people
oh,
because
totally.
we don't collude as easily and it can come
Yeah.
off a little bit unlikable. It's like, why won't you just play the game that I want to play? Because that's
Yeah.
not me.
Because we don't play games. Like we don't,
Yeah.
we're not here for the games. Yeah. No, that's very well. So why can't you just play the game I want to play? And this is the thing, like about the integrity and truth. And of course, truth from like a relative level obviously can look different for everyone. But there is a level of authenticity in the moment or not. And I think a really embodied true 6-2 who knows themselves will always try to aim for that level of authenticity in the moment. Um, and from that, like you said, it can be triggering to people, even if they're just doing that for themselves because it'll automatically reflect where the other person isn't. And so sometimes that's their own trigger that the other person might be experiencing or dealing with. Um, one great quote that I love from this author named Steve Rhodes, who's one of um, Ra's students. And he like Jovi and Archive totally mixed in. They're like, I don't know, they had some drama with him, but I was like, oh, this guy's like on my fractal because I read his The Prophecy of Ra Uru Hu. Highly recommend to everyone who's just interested in learning more about human design. One of the things he says about 6-2s is that, and this is like a rough quote of it, uh, you have to keep continuing to be yourself regardless of the crossed teeth and darted eyes of other people.
Totally.
You know? And so there's like a double pun metaphor in that, a very visual one, but also like not needing to strive for this false societal conditioned version of what perfection is because it's not actually real. And then when the 6-2 kind of in its separateness does what's perfect for it and reflects that, it can create some crossed teeth and darted eyes because if people have just spent their whole lives crossing T's and dotting I's, that's all they know. And it'll also empower and inspire other people, to be themselves. And I think this is like, if I think of the higher expression of the 6-2 energy and what it can offer for others, like our own individuation, which is another layer of like why it's so important from my perspective for us to just share as much as we can when correct before 2027 is that our own individuation support other people in theirs. And one of the things that Ross says, and of course take all of this with a grain of salt, I always say, like even to the clients I work with and share human design with, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. You just both want to put it and move on, right? One of the things that Ross says is that we really only have up until 2027 to awaken. And this is just such a funny thing to think about too. It's almost like challenging to the ego. I know my ego struggled with this because I was like, no, it's like Why is that true? We should always, and anyone can at any time, which is also true, but it's more so that the collective energy, like I said earlier, the background frequency that's occurring right now is supporting this awakening process. So it's like since like 1961, we've gotten help with this process of awakening. And now in 2027, the background frequency help is shifting. It's like a different priority is taking precedence now. And so, I mean, we could see it just the past 10, 15 years too, just all people on their spiritual journeys, just speaking up about it, sharing about it, creating podcasts, having conversations. We're just sharing our perspectives, our teachings, insight, wisdom, knowledge, experiences, whatever, to support each other in this process. And some people are about it and some people aren't. And like understanding the fine line of letting people be in their own trip, right? And then finding the ones who you can resonate with and support each other in their trajectory. So yeah, this just feels like a really important key thing for me right now. Also, another thing which is interesting to think about. If you look at the pictures of the cross of planning and the sleeping phoenix we're moving into, the pictures that I also sent to you earlier, those are called the locks and the keys. And so you can tell the ones on the outside are fixed, the ones on the inside are the ones that change with the precession of the equinoxes. And so another interesting thing I remember Ross saying about this is that we're currently in the time of the revelation of the secrets. And in 2027, the secrets will be back. And I think this is just so funny. If we look at the past several years of like all this information coming out.
So many revelations.
Yes. And even like on a political level, like the Epstein files, like just all of this like truth about.
Yeah, a lot of shadow content that it feels like people in positions of power, whether celebrity, political, etc., may have been able to hide at one point are no longer able to hide.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for that. And supposedly in 2027, this window of revelation will come to an end. It'll be the time of secrets again. And like I said, we'll have to just wait and see what happens, right? We can kind of make all these predictions. But that piece is really interesting to me too. And also why I feel so much more of an impetus to just, when it's correct to share something woo, just share it. Like, even if I'm with people who I feel like are not woo at all, I'll just say it. and I'll trust that the seed, if it's supposed to be planted in their consciousness, if it's going to support them for their highest good, it'll happen. And it doesn't have to be this full, like, trying to convince anyone or on the inverse trying to hide something. It's just kind of really allowing, when correct, and in a loving way, ideally, just even weird, obscure information to be shared, and trusting where it's going to go.
And I feel like, part of what you were saying, about 6-2 is that we are not here to be the people pleasers. And it took me a long time to learn that because we all have, especially the more empathic, people like myself, we have that part of us that wants to please others and wants others to be pleased with us. Every child has that. And that may be part of the conditioning that we are meant to steward in releasing, because we are not that. If I'm being true to myself, I am not that way. I mean, I think people can get joy out of me and, satisfaction and inspiration from me by being me. A quote that my dad shared with me when I was really young, and it's so simple and kind of silly, but it always stuck with me, is everyone wants to make the monkeys clap. And when I was a kid, I got in a ton of trouble as a kid. So
perfect 3-line 6-2.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, that hits, because I never did. I mean, I want all that stuff, the adoration, the applause, the achieve, whatever. There's part of me that and I feel a part of me is like a performer. I like to, like to create, like to share, like to speak. But if it comes from that place of just wanting to please other people, it's not true to me. And a lot of what I've done recently, more in the woo area, has disrupted a lot of people, their perceptions of me, and just felt weird. And, even if I give a speech about something or whatever, if I'm creating something, if I'm creating content in any way, whether it's personal or, for others, it's just more, it has to feel in integrity. And usually that has, maybe not always, but sometimes, or more often than not, a kind of a disruptive component, an awakening component that isn't just about what other people want to hear, isn't necessarily always the sentimental, thing. It's like, it's just the truth, and it's the way of my being, and I can be funny and I can be whatever. But, that aspect of the 6-2, that aspect of myself and others feels so important to honor and to give voice to that. It feels important for our health, for our design to be in alignment and to be in flow, and for whatever is coming, whatever we're called to do, whatever leadership role, whatever mentor role we're here to play, we need to own that authority. Because if we don't, we stay small, we're still hanging on to that conditioning. For me, I get sick, and it's like, so for as many times as I need to disrupt people around me, and again, it's not by bypassing, taking responsibility for my actions and honoring if I hurt people and things like that, which has been lessons my whole life. But it's about knowing that there is a reason for the way that I am. Like, it's not just wrong or bad or selfish or inconsiderate or whatever. I'm actually a deeply compassionate, loving person. But there's a uniqueness to the way that comes out. And it's taken a long time to honor how to be in the highest expression of that. And I'm still learning. But I find that to be a very important part of the 6-2 development, and likely what everyone is meant to learn on some level as we are shifting.
Yeah, it makes such an interesting point, too. It's like, why are so many people afraid or don't like feeling uncomfortable upon hearing something that's just not all roses and butterflies? And like you said, when it's like, of course, being loving and not being like intentionally hurting people, like, that's important. But yeah, the ability to have trouble dealing with the emotional realm when it comes to, like you said, you sharing things, you sharing your perspectives or what you're seeing or your opinion or whatever. And one interesting paradox of that too is like acknowledging that there are people who probably also totally get it.
Totally. And they might not always be front and center to validate me, but they're there in the background, and the messages reach them. And when those people come forth, it helps me see, oh, there is a purpose to what I'm doing, even if it's not for everybody.
Yeah, totally. And one really important thing too from the human design framework that has also stuck with me, especially as a 6-2, like I said, we have transpersonal karma, right? There are only few people that can really hear us. And this doesn't just mean like someone hearing your voice when you're talking. It's more of like an embodied understanding that happens on a level that we're not even fully conscious of. For example, and I mentioned this earlier to you too. I think the reason that Ra went to the the Ruina in Ibiza was because he was at a train station or something, or he met someone in passing who randomly mentioned Ibiza to him, and that sent him. There's something about that message that felt correct for him, even though it was a stranger, which sent him on his path and trajectory. And so this is so different too from what we're used to expecting the people around us or the people on social media following us or our family members to get and understand us, when really in this greater scheme of things, it's like maybe they're not really the ones who our message is for. And when we continue to keep putting out the message, especially for a 6-2, because we're here to be called out, right? So it's like we have to be visible somehow for people to recognize the 2 line and to call out. And so trusting that, okay, this message, this post, this blog, or this podcast, whatever, will have the ripple effect in the way that it's supposed to, as long as I'm being correct in the moment of this response to sharing the thing or having the conversation or engaging or doing the project or whatever it is. And I feel like this really emphasizes too the whole point about this kind of being like a movie that we're in, that we're participating in, and that we're watching happen around us. This isn't to say that we don't have any control of it, obviously. To a certain extent, we do, and the whole free will conversation is a different thing. But knowing that there is, as I've said previously, an intuitive intelligence of the occurring things that are happening, even our desires or inclinations, or like being called to something that's leading us to something greater. And especially for the sixth line, this is so key. Trusting in that alignment, because when line 6 hits the Chiron at 50, when it's time to come off our roof, the alignment is very, very important to our health. For the sixth line, like 6-2s, it'd be like the health of the mind. The 4-6s, the health of the body, which is interesting because I know some 4-6s who just hit their Chiron, and there's some issues that they're experiencing, and in retrospect, they were sharing the ways in life, or the circumstances or the relationships or whatever that weren't in alignment. And so although this can sound maybe selfish to some people, I really feel like when we're living in our truth in a loving way and we're not harming anyone, it's also supporting by default the people around us, even if we don't have like the same engagement with them or the same relationship, or you know and so with the 6-2, this understanding of alignment, and I think this goes beyond human design for everyone, but just essentially knowing what is correct for us on a feeling embodied level is so important to our health and our well-being as we get older.
Yeah, and like living in our truth and what serves us, which I think can appear selfish at times because it doesn't always appear relational, is what serves the world best. And that is, something I've known to be true. And it's been and that might be true for everyone, but I think some people are just more relational, communal beings, and I can be a little more solitary. But there are very like real physical health related reasons for that. Like my body will get sick if it's not in alignment. It's taken me years to recognize that. And it might just be more potent for us 6-2s, and acknowledging that, serving ourselves in an alignment way, not just in like I want everything for me in a material way. Serving ourselves in the spiritual, in integrity and healthy way, is what allows the world to receive from us the best.
Yes. Yeah, very well said. What you said about the body responding to what was not correct is really important too, because I think so many people just override it or numb it or keep powering through when there's a very obvious call of the form to pivot. And, of course, this is all connected to when we look at 2027, the potential shifts that'll happen, the potential dissolutions of certain systems that maybe won't be as sustainable as they have been, the potential world calamities. There is an emphasis, which just almost sounds so simple and mundane, too good to be true, but I'm like, I don't think it actually is. There is an emphasis on following our strategy and authority and understanding what it means to be in alignment for us to be able to make it through the next 10, 15 years. And what's interesting is this also is connected financially too. So it's kind of like this idea that when we are living in that alignment, regardless of what's happening externally, somehow, some way, in our correctness, we will always be supported. And so just the idea of that is like, okay, it's like refreshing and reassuring. And of course, like we don't know. No one really knows what's going to happen tomorrow. We can have ideas and maybe we can be correct, which we'll find out when it comes. But there is something about continuing to tune into, especially as a 6-2, where we see the collective going, not from a pessimistic way. That's easy to do. Trust me, I would know too.
Right. Yeah. Well,
You
that I
know?
feel like that's a key a nuance to like
Yeah.
speaking our truth, and sometimes we talk about the shadows and sometimes we are disruptive, but from just from my own personal experience, it's still holding actually that very loving, optimistic quality of the
Yeah.
higher, almost more like noble
Mm.
light, because
Mm.
that's almost necessary for me to be in alignment. And if that drops, then it's not really, and then it's not just
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm just sharing. It's like the comedian who's like, I just want the freedom to say whatever I want. It's like, well, your
Yeah.
words actually matter, even if they're jokes.
Yeah. And
So
people listen to you.
yeah. And so for me, that nuance of like, it has to have that, if it has that high resonance, then I can speak truth that can
Mm.
maybe sound harsh at times, but it's coming from a deeply empowered place. If
Yeah.
the resonance drops, then it kind of if it sounds complaining or whiny or whatever it is, if it's just my own emotional stuff, which is valid, just not always meant to be shared,
Yeah.
that's, I think, the nuance of being able to hold that light with the powerful stuff that we have to say.
Mm. Yeah, no, I love that distinction. There is something about even saying the things that can be challenging to others, communicated from that higher place of truth. Like, it's not always just going to feel great and expansive and light. Sometimes it'll be piercing and penetrating, and that's kind of the purpose, to support others in their own evolution too.
And maybe part of that difference is that we can be emotionally clear as we say it. Other people can be
Yes.
triggered, but like if I'm triggered, that's not the best time for me to be speaking. But if
Yeah,
I'm
very well
clear,
said.
then I can say the harsher stuff because I can do it in a way that is aligned and nuanced.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much because that does put the primary responsibility onto us
Yeah.
for whatever we're sharing, whatever is being initiated, not just in the human design context, but just, yeah, what is being shared and the potential ripple effect that's being created versus from that very annoyed or irritated or frustrated place. Especially as manifesting generators too, right? Because it's like we'll create what we inform in response.
And it gives us that compass, that inner compass to follow. It's like, it's also, as any artist or creator might value, that inner compass, regardless of how things are received. How, was I in alignment when I shared it? How did I feel, aligned, empowered, and good about what I delivered? If it was a speech or something, and maybe half the room is like, what was that about? And, but it's like, but how was that? Or if something that gets 0 likes or something, whatever it is on social media, was I in alignment when I shared it? And
Yeah,
that's most important. And that's always going to be most
totally.
important.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Yeah, because we really don't know the ripple effect. Like we don't know what the potential outcome could be, even if it was one person that read that needed to hear that day. There's something else that I wanted to share about 2027 too, and just kind of allowing ourselves to view the matrix in this way. And I'm trusting that it'll fall on the ears who are meant to receive it, and those who won't will just like
I think
have it roll off.
those who are listening to this podcast already and have made it this
Okay.
far and have even
Yeah,
listened to
good
any of
point.
the other episodes, like they're probably going to be pretty open to this. And if not,
Okay.
hey, maybe this is your time to hop off, and that's cool too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's because I try to be conscious of how deep into the matrix I, how should I say this? How much I share about my own perception of seeing deep into the matrix. And I think with the human design framework and just hearing the way that Ra phrases this, very matter of factly, it's very refreshing for me to be like, oh, okay, cool. There are probably a lot of people, a lot more than I realize, that are kind of aware of the many layers of reality that we're living in. And so I say this to share that one of the things that Ra says about 2027, and I alluded to this earlier about the timeline for us to awaken, is that as we move into 2027 and the generations after, there's going to be another species of humans coming onto the planet, which are known as the Raves, which I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of. I know you've heard of, Dan. But they're not going to operate the same way that we do. They're going to almost seem like they're what we would consider in modern day to consider what we diagnose people with as autistic. But what happens is when they come into groups of 5, so in their own alignment and correctness, find the people that they're supposed to connect with in groups of 5, they create something called a penta, which is a trans-auric entity. And going back a little bit, according to Ra, 2027, the intention of the program that has been running thus far is changing. And so when he says that there's a time limit to awaken into our individuated state, the term that comes up, I know this can sound cliche, but it really is like love yourself. He says this so much, love yourself. We see this all the time, like when the personal development field and just, love yourself, but really on this very, very deep, deep layer of understanding your gifts and your shadows and your nuances and what annoys you about yourself, what you actually appreciate, like in the whole spectrum of getting to the point where we can understand who we are. Being able to fully love ourselves very deeply is what's really going to support us in our liberation. And even from like a Hindu Vedic perspective, when I think about leaving the cycles of reincarnation, right? Fulfilling our karma and our dharma and getting to that point, I kind of see this in a similar way. Because as I mentioned, the program's purpose for us individuated beings as it is now is not going to be a thing for it. I'm calling the program it. It's not going to be a thing for it post 2027. Post 2027, it's going to be about the raves and let's just say like the ripple effect in the matrix that the raves can create to perpetuate the program. For us currently, if we look at ourselves as beings with egos, a sense of self, we have our own unique design, we go through life and we have the relationships and we experience things and we're living in this greater program, I would say the priority is to really tune into what it means to love ourselves and our own alignment, strategy, and authority, even if you're not into human design, whatever you want to call that, like however you want to figure out what's correct for you, doing that and letting that be the focus rather than the conditioning that can come from the program. And what's interesting too is that like from an astrological perspective, this is also connected because the program, like astrology, is a part of the program. And so it's nuanced and it just shows how entangled we really are. But this is why I love astrology too, because it's kind of like the analogy I use, maybe you've heard this before, it's like just knowing the weather, before you go outside, if you need an umbrella or raincoat or not. And so with that awareness too, we can't separate from our ego identity what's happening here. We can acknowledge like, okay, my Saturn return. Whoa, there's going to be some events that happen, but there's still this being that's operating and engaging with it. And so I'm saying all of this to say, before 2027, from now until 2027, I don't know if this is the right word, taking advantage of or being aware of our capacity to transform and awaken and utilizing that awareness to the best of our ability in whatever way that really looks like. I can share what it looks like for me, but of course I can't tell someone else what it should look like for them. It can be something grand, some life change that someone does. It can be nuance, a nuanced choice that someone makes to shift their internal reality. It can look so different for everyone. But the way that I interpret that is to really get closer to understanding what it means to love ourselves. And I feel like I need to clarify too, this isn't like, oh, it's it feels correct for me to inflict harm on this person, so I'm going to do that. To me, like, that's not correct. If we think about the human design framework and we think about the signature of each type, right? So, like, the manifestor feeling peace, the generator feeling satisfaction, so on. I don't think we'd have the majority of the issues that we do now in this world if everyone was actually correct. Because there would be a sense of harmony in everyone's individuation where we wouldn't need to act out on frustration, take it out on other people. Of course, anger would be an energy, but it's not like something that would get to the point where it's continually causing destruction. At least that's what I would like to think that. And so I'm saying all of this to say we can still experience the spectrum of the lows of being human in a way that can be productive to ourselves and support us in our own liberation in this form and potentially outside of it. And I think it's important to explore, for everyone to explore their own ways of doing that and understand what that even means to them.
Some things I'd like to reflect back based on what you said is, and see if this resonates for you, is that, for those of us non-raves or pre-2027 beings, etc., maybe it's the case that we are more representative of the old world. We are more representative of the collective trauma and the really kind of difficult experience that Earth has been, and the ancestral lineages, the ways that we just have not felt able to escape our conditioning, our trauma, the alcoholism, the abuse, the whatever it is that's in the lineage, and has felt so difficult for many of us. And it hasn't even necessarily been in our design to overcome. Maybe it's just been in our soul or that life's contract to learn from, and that whether it's between now and 2027 or however long we have, the work, that as people like to say, doing that work, working with those emotions, and this feels to me part of loving oneself is looking clearly at seeing the shadows, not numbing, not distracting, not escaping, because that's the only way you can love yourself, is if you're willing to see it and sit with
Definitely.
it. It's the parts of ourselves that we all don't like. There's no exceptions here. There's no one who's like, oh, I love every part of myself. No, you don't. There's a part of
Yeah.
yourself when you're really wounded and you feel like shit
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
don't like that experience. And that's not the eternal you, but it's the conditioned human you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it for those of us who come from this old world, these lineages. And I also wonder if, that's part of the individuality piece, is that for us, it's really important that we live freely and authentically, because because we have so much conditioning that we are here to get free of.
Mm-hmm.
And we can connect in other ways. But for this new generation, this rave community, and I love the intersection of neurodivergence, because I consider myself to be on that spectrum. And now it's much more in the collective conscience with the telepathy
Yeah.
tapes and things like that.
Yeah.
That those beings may be more naturally communal, in the sense that they're tapped in to the
Yes.
oneness, to the
Mm-hmm.
higher knowing, the telepathy, whatever is developing there, and it's just more online there. When it looks more disabled in some ways, like physically or some
Yeah.
ways, there's more connection in other ways.
Totally.
And I wonder if they will just have less of the karma that we carry,
Mm-hmm.
less of the work to do,
Uh-huh.
and therefore, just less of the maybe less awakening to do, because they will already be coming in at a certain frequency. Not that they'll
Yeah.
be perfect beings, but able to, like you said, just contribute more to the program
Mm-hmm.
um, right away,
Yeah.
rather than many of us. And we may be at the tail end of these generations, but many of us who have just had to do so much work on
Yeah.
ourselves just
Mm-hmm.
to start to align. They might come in a little
Yeah.
more in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's like acknowledging that there are almost two different purposes. Because when I think about like the different species, right, it's almost like there's an innate difference genetically, but also in turn how the being is operating. And so for us, having the potential to awaken and to individuate, and supposedly it's a small percentage of people, really, that will actually, I don't even know if I want to say want to do that, because can we like control the things that we want, that
Right.
had naturally have that inclination to do that? Like you said earlier, like we can't not. It's
Yeah.
just, it's
Some of
there.
us, it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
Others, may just be more connected to the physical reality and not have as much, not be invited as heavily to go that route.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's just not their karma or their dharma. And maybe it's like there's something else that they're needed for. And so us being the beings that have the opportunity to individuate, and then the raves, uh, going back to what you said, yeah, supposedly they won't use language the same way that we do. Like they won't need to. Especially when they come into the groups of five, they're going to be able to communicate through that other dimensional form. Like I said, the penta, which is the transauric entity of, uh, which is what will connect them on a non-local, it's still local, but like a non-3D level. And them not being able to, I don't even know if it's able to, but them maybe not being as inclined to use linear language like we do from the way that we categorize intelligence, or like someone's capability, right? All these standards that we have of what is, that's not going to be relevant during their time because, like you said, they're going to be able to have strengths in other ways that we're not used to operating in. And as far as like what their purpose is for the program, I feel like the deep truth of that only the program will know. But it is interesting to think about, especially like with the telepathy tapes and these
I
other
think it's a
bits of
great
this.
reference point
Yeah.
because when you listen, I've actually only listened to one. I've listened to interviews and stuff, but I've only been guided to listen to one episode. I mean, I also just know a lot about this stuff, and I've had
Yeah,
experience with
totally.
this before this became trendy.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but
I always feel like better late than never with this stuff, though,
yeah, no, I
I'm
love
like,
that it's
even if
out
it's a
there. I love
fad,
that it's
like
out
let
there.
it out.
I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that it's out there for other
totally.
people.
Exactly.
Um, but from what I've heard, like references to the hill, or the place, sort of the place that a lot of these young people will travel to astrally, like where they'll connect with one
Wow.
another, and they'll connect to the other
In a
side.
certain
Like there's
geographic
media,
location on another dimension?
yeah, there's there's mediumship capacity. Like all of these young people that are
Wow.
demonstrating these capacities, they're demonstrating psychic capacities to the point where it would be like where you during sleep or in a dream
Yeah.
might feel you traveled somewhere and met with your
Wow.
ancestor. Whereas they're doing this consciously and they're
Yeah.
connecting with each other. Like they have a network
Whoa.
where they don't have to
Interesting.
meet up in person. And they're verifying this because there were examples that are
Uh-huh.
mind-blowing of finding out, like from being at the hill or whatever, that
Mhm.
someone was going to die or one of their friends did die, and they have no
Uh-huh.
other way of knowing this because some
Yeah,
of them
yeah.
are mute, physically disabled, they're not connected to the world, their parents don't know this kind of information, so they're verifying that like the hill is real, and they're going there, they're hanging out, and they're learning in at times in a way that people who have had near death experiences talk about learning on the other side, like whether
Wow.
people call it heaven or whatever. They'll talk about being in libraries and
Uh-huh.
learning from masters about the secrets of
Whoa.
the universe, and they're talking about being able to do this at the hill or when they sleep or whatever. And so those
Wow.
dimensional capacities is what I feel is opening and
Mm.
descending into our physical reality. And there's a veil that's breaking there. And those that have those natural capacities, that those of us who are more connected to the physical reality they're not as activated.
Yeah.
That's part of what's coming in, is like that connection, that channel, and that network is coming online for more.
That's phenomenal.
It's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
The one episode I heard, I think it was episode 9, it was mind-blowing, actually. So, yeah.
And it sounds a lot like what I would imagine some of these rave children being able to do.
Right. Like I don't necessarily want to draw, because I don't know as much, about the raves and who knows, but so I don't want to draw necessarily a one-to-one direct connection to the neurodivergent population and the sort of starseed connection to exactly what the raves will be like. I don't know if that's, but it definitely seems to be some overlap, is what I would say.
Totally. Yeah. And like in the human design framework, there are 4 particular qualifiers that will determine whether or who or what a rave child would even be born to. So according to these 4 qualifiers, it would mean like the majority of them, I imagine, it would be like 100, 150, 200 years for a good amount to actually be born onto this planet. But even with all of this information, right? This data, and this is like channeled, synthesized, whatever from research, I'm always just like trying to pay attention to what's actually happening and what I'm actually seeing happen.
Yeah, because especially for people like us who are so drawn to the higher realms and to that information, I think it's really important to stay grounded and be like, what is actually unfolding in my reality?
Yes.
Just personally, like, how do I live this day? And what am I actually seeing? So we don't get too caught up in what we're hearing intuitively or what we're sensing conceptually or intellectually or otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And saying that to say, like, even the telepathy tape stuff, I wonder too if somehow, um, although I think there is an actual mutation in the body graph too, that will like bring in the official rave children, but nonetheless, this overarching connection of these extrasensory abilities and ways of operating coming online.
It totally feels connected. It totally feels relevant. There's more of these children, and I've worked with, personally as a clinician, with some really psychic kids. Like, it is real, and it's and it's mind-blowing even for me, and I've been around this stuff for a little while now. It's like it's pretty wild. And there's a total uptick. There totally is.
This is just reminding me too, like why I even got it, like followed through on the desire to share all of this information or have these conversations or whatever. As I mentioned earlier, this window. So another thing about this window, like I said, we're moving out of the one line, right? The onesie investigation. It's the data, it's the science, it's getting to the bottom of the things. It's almost as if our opportunity to know the details of things is also going to close at 2027. It's not just almost, according to this framework and according to the shift from the cross of planning to the sleeping phoenix. And one also important thing that I've noticed not a lot of human design people talk about, our cross intersects. So it's the cross of planning, but it's also the cross of Maya. That's the current cycle that we're in. And then we're going to the sleeping phoenix, but we're also going into the cross of penetration. I think it's cross of penetration. I'm gonna have to double check that, but it's like the 51 is in there. So the point I'm making is that there are other gates that are going to be activated. And so the current one that we're in does have a focus on the details. There's a focus on inner truth and finding that inner truth, which I feel like is supporting the awakening process, but also the details, getting to the bottom of things, getting the information, the data, the knowledge. And so I wonder what this means for, AI, even technology, right? If you look at from like 61 was when we went into the one line to now, it just how science, technology, all of these innovative fields have blown up since then, particularly after like the 80s, 90s, but the government knew about the internet and these other technologies before it was introduced to the public. And so we're kind of getting to this window of like the background frequency support in finding this information isn't going to be as available. But I wonder too if it's not going to be as relevant because we're not going to need to prove it. Right? Like even with this telepathy stuff, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't, yeah, you could probably prove it for some, but for some you can't. Like that's not going to be as relevant anymore. It's going to be more of this sixth line, like, okay, we know that this already is working.
Yeah, and we can already see that because actually I know that they're doing more like double, triple blind studies and stuff with the telepathy tapes, but it's like, and that's cool, but I almost wonder if it's like barking up the wrong tree because it's like those who are open and resonate with this material will
Uh-huh.
understand it. And I don't get too involved
Exactly.
in, the fights that go on online about literally everything, but I've
Yeah.
seen some people who, who, especially people who are like the famous mentalist kind of people who look like they're
Mhm.
doing psychic work, but will say they're not and actually vehemently deny that any of those capacities exist and say that
Really?
yeah, they're these people like this guy Oz Perlman or whatever. They're like famous and they'll go around performing these kind of a blend of magic and like really trained mental acuity to
Mhm.
like guess what number you're thinking and things like that appear very psychic, but they will actually be vehemently again there's just these huge deniers of there being any existence of the spirit realm or
Wait, so
anything.
how do they justify them knowing the information accurately?
It's actually humbled me to see that there is a way to train and to be very acutely mastered at sort of, I think it's a kind of being able to not read people's minds, but it's a utilization of, I think
That sounds
there's a capacity
psychic. That sounds psychic.
it does.
Like
But
that's
there's a capacity to our brains, I
uh-huh.
think. And I think this is where the intersection may happen between like neuroscience and the psychic or spirit realm is that there's a
Uh-huh.
capacity to our brains that we can actually train to the point where you're able to discern very acutely, maybe with context clues, you know, what people are thinking or what they're going to say or what animal is coming to mind. I think it's a very interesting line. I've come to the point where because some of these people are so vehemently against, and I don't think they're lying, I think they genuinely don't believe the psychic realm. I think sure there is a component to it, but I actually think that they have utilized a certain
Muscle or
aspect, yeah, of their
uh-huh.
brains to train
Yeah.
themselves to be like the master magician mentalist type people in that
Interesting.
science-based, one line way. And what's interesting to
Mhm.
me is they are very quick to disprove the telepathy or to say it's not real or, I could do that and to me, those people, if they're not open, they're just not going to be open to it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
my mission. And I hope it's not Kai Dickens' mission or anyone else's mission to feel like you need to convert those people.
Yeah.
Because, because again, this comes back to like our own personal reality and our own belief systems. Like, if we're not open to that, then it's not necessarily it's not our path to be open to that. And if
Yeah,
it is our
totally.
path, then we will, whether someone comes out with the correct study or not.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, it's not about just waiting for that one golden piece of research or literature that convinces people, because if they're not open to it, they're not gonna be.
Totally.
Whether, it's Joe Rogan or whoever else that is like,
Mhm.
wanting to investigate that or be open to it. I think it's gonna be for each person within themselves to
Yeah.
see if they resonate and not feel like they need to justify or validate um, what they feel in their heart. And it can be challenging to people because it sounds like an excuse to throw out science and just believe in anything, which is a tricky time we're in because there's a lot of conspiracy. It's
Mhm.
not the same thing. I mean, everyone is entitled or allowed to believe in whatever they want.
Mhm.
Doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
And science is valuable. Like it's
For
not
sure.
throwing out science,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
it's evolving science to include the natural, other aspects of intelligence and intuition, which a lot of these neurodivergent kids are speaking to. Like they don't need to prove any. They know. they know God is real. They know spirit
Mhm.
exists because they experience it. It's experience
Yeah.
based. And so it doesn't need to be verified to them, and it
Mhm.
shouldn't necessarily need to be verified to us, although it's cool, if for science to move forward. One thing as you were speaking that I just saw the parallel is that in the 60s, even though there was a lot of like the hippie movement and opening to
Oh, that's right.
that level of
Summer of 69.
to that level of spirit and love, there was also in clinical psychology, there was a huge shift toward behavioral psychology, which is a very it's like a very material level
Okay. As
of,
opposed to what?
as opposed to what you might call depth psychology or the
Oh.
psychoanalytic or existential psychology that was more Freudian,
Mhm.
and it was more about the unconscious realms. And
Mhm.
it was more, and Carl Jung was part of that movement too.
Yeah.
It's more about an understanding of other dimensions of the human experience, even if we're just talking about the emotions and, material that's not, the behavioral psych movement was very much, it was almost like treating humans like animals. It's like, well, just get them to comply and it's reward and punishment. And that's how we shape behavior, and behavior is all that matter. It's like, it never really resonated with me personally. And there's
Yeah.
value to some of it, the way you might train a dog or whatever, the Pavlovian,
Yeah.
experimentation. And that, turned into more cognitive behavioral therapy, which, is popular therapy and has its place. But just like that, those movements and frameworks can have their place while
Yeah.
maybe not losing their position as the leading primary evidence-based
Yeah.
you know tool, because actually that word evidence-based, which I never liked too much, it has become very dominant. Everything in psychology, everything in terms of supporting healing, at least, in the modern Western world, needs to be evident. Oh, is that evidence based? Can you prove that EMDR, internal family systems, or whatever, is evidence based? And we may be moving into a time where that term, thankfully for me, may not be as. I mean, it's still valuable. It's not to throw the
Yeah.
baby out with the bathwater, but it
Yeah.
may just be a shifting of focus,
Totally.
that again can evolve. What is evidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not saying, oh, I'll just do anything that has no evidence, but can evidence be experience based?
Yeah.
Can evidence be subjective in addition to
Exactly.
being objective?
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Because it is evidence-based can still be limiting. And science generally speaks on averages, right? But what about the anomalies? And just because they can't be peer reviewed or identified the same way, that it's not a reason to negate it completely. And so I think this is the thing I've noticed in the scientific community is that there is this, like, if we can't prove it, we're going to ignore it, which I feel like is so limiting from an intellectual perspective because it's not even allowing the potential to know. And so it's this really like small nuance of a shift in perception. And what you were talking about earlier too, about the mentalists, this is so interesting to me because I also realize when I speak to people about human design or astrology or whatever, the way that I perceived it is like there's a fundamental difference in the perspective of reality for individuals who believe in things like this or don't. And it's the difference between acknowledging the interconnectedness of everything versus seeing everything more in like a reductionist, materialist way. And so even the mentalist, right? It sounds like you were saying that he says that there are clues, visual clues that you can pick up on, maybe someone's body language or whatever that will help you understand. So it's still a very egocentric, mind-centric way of I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, so therefore, because of that, I can get that, rather than acknowledging there is some non-local communication happening that's helping me gain information. And maybe, sure, there are these other things happening too that my mind's picking up on, but there's also something else
Which
here.
is also just proven in physics at this point that we live in a quantum field. So
Yes,
there
exactly.
is an intersection happening that you just won't be able to deny a certain level of it. To the degree to which you feel you have access to it is, again, based on your personal beliefs, but it's actually proven in certain areas of science.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I love what you said about giving up the responsibility or just not focusing on the responsibility either of changing people's minds. And that's been such a big thing for me too, is just sharing when correct. And also from a karmic dharmic perspective, right? Sometimes if we're like imposing stuff on people, we're also interrupting their karma. So kind of just knowing when to pivot, like you said earlier, the path of least resistance too, and then sharing information when correct and trusting in the seeds that would be planted, rather than really trying to get someone else to see our perspective, see things the way that we see things.
Yeah, and it feels like maybe for the 6-2, like the role model that we are is not the kind that needs to convince, but is the kind that simply lives our truth, and that allows others to learn from us in all the ways that they need to, and meets every person individually in the way they need to receive from us, rather than us trying to, curate ourselves or conform ourselves to meet a certain person's belief system or a certain community's belief system. We just show up as we are, and that ripples out in the way that it's meant to. One example that had been coming to mind that I knew about is that Barack Obama is a 6-2.
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
he became president, not right at 50, but like shortly before.
Oh, wow.
And so it definitely feels intersecting, his stepping into presidency and coming off the roof into that leadership. And, whether he had all the best policies or said all the right things, if that's even possible, or even did all the right things. To me, what is most impactful about him is just his presence, his beingness, and what he represents and the energy he brought. And that feels representative of the 6-2 energy.
Yeah. And the 6-2 also, there's a natural inclination to almost like not have to lead, but also not following. But this doesn't mean that by default they aren't leaders. It's just like not needing followers, but also not following other people. And in that, there is this, I guess, aversion to also people telling them what they need to do.
Definitely.
You're like, because there's this natural like inclination to us having our own inner authority, right? And it's funny because you mentioned the Obama thing too. It's like he did have this cool, chill, like you could, out of all the majority of the presidents that I have been elected in my lifetime, he was probably the one who had the most shit together. Excuse my lack of eloquence in saying that.
Well, he was probably the only one I'd actually want to personally hang out with. I'll just put it that way.
No, totally, and like, but I mean, I think there are layers to it, like you said too, like no one's perfect, but just like the level of emotional intelligence, even. But it wasn't something, a kind of energy that needed to prove something or that needed even his ego stroked or anything. It was just kind of like, okay, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm here to do, and this is how I envision it. And I think that says a lot about kind of the nature of the 6-2 when it is really being correct. It knows how to lead itself. And then, like you said, by default, it's going to support other people in feeling led, but without like imposing.
And what comes to mind is maybe this is also part of the 2027 shift, is that like it's a different kind of leadership. It's almost like a leaderless leadership, like what the 6-2s may be invited to step into and what others may be invited to step into is that old, more patriarchal systems are loosening, are crumbling. So there's not meant to be one guru at the mountaintop or one, president that everyone listens to. And certainly we're already experiencing that now with our, the current drama cycle that we've been involved in. And so there's not necessarily supposed to be one voice that unifies the country or the world or whatever. And there's not necessarily supposed to be one voice that unifies a community. There can be leaders that maybe lead from more off center or more background or in more communal ways, that it's not about ego. It's not about my way or the highway. It's a different kind of authority. And that may be what we're all being asked to embody. The authority within ourselves, right? The leader of our own design. But in terms of others, whatever we're called into, whatever degree of spotlight or background that we're needed in.
Yeah. And the whole there being a single guru, one person that has the truth, that's very line 5 energy, right? It's the king queen archetype. The 6 energy, the 6-2, but also particularly as we move into the 6 background frequency, it's here to teach, I guess, like the reintegration of one's power. It's not giving our power away to another authority, to a system, to an external individual that's going to tell us what our truth is. And this is what the line 6 energy is teaching too. And I could know that can be challenging for people who have spent so much of their lives looking for someone else, whether it's the government or an individual or a teacher. And this isn't to say like gurus, teachers, like we all have codes for each other. I believe that. But there's a level of precedence that I think it's important to maintain within our own agency to understand what's true for us and make decisions, rather than do something just because someone else is saying to do it, even if our inner core is like, this is off. And so as we move into the 6th line energy and as we come into our fuller embodiments, I feel like there's going to be an opportunity for this level of liberation, because the 6-2, even as like a guide or a teacher, or even as like a guru, whatever you want to call it, it's not here to necessarily have other people be dependent on it.
Right.
For what it shares. So it's not like, okay, this is a wisdom and insight, or this is me being a coach or a mentor, and you need to work with me for X, Y, and Z in order for you to do the thing. It's kind of like, hey, I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to teach you to figure out for yourself, and then you can go and do it, and I can go off on my own path.
Which is like actually what a lot of true gurus would say themselves. Christian Murty being the most famous that comes to mind is because he was selected and anointed, and then he disbanded the whole following that was built around him and said something to the effect of, truth is a pathless land. Like there's nothing, there's no path. I'm not here to lead anyone. But then, in his own way, he becomes a leader and he has followers. So it feels paradoxical.
Yeah.
But, some people are born leaders in that way, but I think it's about disbanding the worship, which has been pedestalizing. And some gurus, fall into the trap more than others about encouraging that, or colluding with, Osho comes to mind, who was one who I respect a lot of his teachings, but that guy really leaned into having a worshiping following, having like 20 Rolls Royces or whatever he had. But it's like, I think, and you see it a lot in celebrity culture now. We worship the Taylor Swifts of the world, and then we also try to tear them down. It's actually it reflects the true psychological concept of narcissism, which is just idealization and devaluation. And it's like, this is what we do to every celebrity, every person in power: build them up, tear them down. And so it's not, this time may not be about like, disbanding the notion of people, and being powerful and speaking truth to power and being leaders, but maybe disbanding the worship of them as somehow better than others, and because everyone's going to have to discern their own truth.
Exactly.
I don't feel, and it's already happened with sort of the fragmentation of news and truth and whatever we know to be true. We're going to have to discern this for ourselves, and the only way to do that is by following our design. Because no matter how powerful a person is, they're not necessarily going to speak the truth that you need.
Exactly. I think that also requires so much sitting with oneself that the majority of the population probably is naturally averse to.
Yeah, because it's not comfortable. And most of us are
Yeah.
not, almost none of us are like comfortable with it, but some of us are
No.
just more inclined to do it
Yeah.
because of the invitations of our design to like, because of the difficulties with the external world and just the natural inclination to go inward because there seems to be an importance
Mhm.
there. And the proclivity, um, and resonance with Eastern philosophy or Buddhism or whatever it is, something that invited us to go inward.
Yeah.
Whereas others may, just like I was saying before, others can maybe be a bit more cynical and get away with it a bit easier. Others
Hmm.
can just maybe use more of the distracting substances of the material world and get away with it relatively a bit
Yeah.
more, maybe until their Chiron return at 50 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't
Totally.
mean they're not suffering, but they just, their constitution, their nervous system may be able to
Yeah.
tolerate it a bit better than mine, for example,
Yeah.
who has to
Totally.
be like,
Uh-huh.
pretty like strictly sober at this point,
Yeah. No,
because
definitely. Yeah. Me too.
it's just
Uh-huh.
things that, do not work for me and my body and my mind. And,
Yeah.
um, that may apply in the inclination to go inward as well. With that said, the shift in 2027 may be inviting all of us to do so, but some
Hmm.
more capable than others.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like to touch on what you mentioned about the whole substance thing too, I can totally relate to that. It's almost like the more heightened the awareness is, the more sensitized it is to anything that is dissonant, which ironically, maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was used to numb. But it's like since there's been more space for awareness of those things that were being numbed, it's kind of like, wait, what? No, this is more. It's like going in the opposite direction, right? Almost like a regression.
It's like a higher knowing that you can't unsee or unlearn that, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be
Yeah.
numbed. I actually can't
Yes.
be numbed right now.
Yeah.
It's like I can't be
Hmm.
out of commission. Whereas before it'd be like, no, being numbed is great. Being high is great.
Yeah.
Who cares? Tune out for the world a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Now it's like I can't afford to be numbed, actually, just
This,
for
yes,
myself.
this one. Yeah. And it's almost like the aftermath is not even worth at all the experience of, yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I don't want to suffer either,
I
but
know.
but the
I know.
numbing doesn't help. And I think the more
Yeah.
there's just the layers of sensitization and awakening and awareness to that point, you can't unsee it once you see it, that like being conscious is better, even if it's painful sometimes.
Yeah, I think that piece. Also, when we think about the potential for liberation, even from like a karmic dharmic level. And one thing you mentioned about the six twos too, and there's something in human design called incarnation sequencing, which I just know like a fraction of, if even that. But essentially, if you look up the profile lines, there's a reason that there are for profile lines that are transpersonal. There is this need to interact with other people in order to fulfill our karmic purpose. And so sometimes that does require some baggage being held, or it requires a greater awareness of dynamics that need to be played out in order for the karma to be cleared and the dharma to be expanded upon. But I'm saying all this to say, like, the capacity to deeply feel and self-actualize and how it's not always good and pretty and comfortable in order to support us in this higher dharma, this fulfillment that we're here to experience. And I think that's such a key piece, like the satisfaction, not just from like a superficial hedonistic satisfaction, but the feeling of fulfillment, contentment that comes from the completion of something, even if it didn't look the prettiest or it wasn't the greatest experience, but that inner awareness of that thing to support us to move onto the next trajectory, onto the next vista, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is necessary for everybody, but it certainly has felt necessary for me that in order to be willing to sit with the discomfort and the pain and to relinquish certain behaviors and things, to have a higher sense of whether it's faith or the guidance that I receive or the insights or the deeper knowing that there is a larger game at play, that there is a higher path, and there is a feeling of being in alignment. And that is what is most satisfying to me, is to feel like I'm in alignment, even if it doesn't make the physical circumstances look great. And to me, having that
definitely
compass is what has helped me through some of the darkest times. Because without that, it's like, well, is this all in vain? What am I suffering for? Like, why don't I just go try to be more, whatever, try to be more normal or just have more fun or whatever? And it's like, well, because I'm putting my faith in what seems to me to be a higher, more soul-aligned path that I can't necessarily prove to anyone, but I feel deep in my heart. And the more that I align, the thing is, the more that it's a self-fulfilling sensitization, because the more that I give into it, the stronger it becomes. And the stronger discernment becomes, to where when something feels out of alignment, my whole body cringes. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. I just can't do it. I'm not going to explain myself anymore. I'm just not going back to being a traditional clinician, for example. I will literally go work, I don't know, at a grocery store or something while my higher dharma comes into place, because I just can't physically, it's not even about what I want. I just can't get myself to do it anymore. And I think that has come from a truly a giving of energy to that discernment. So I've allowed that voice to go stronger, to the point where I can't get off the track, even if I wanted to try and just go and be someone else. It's like, no, now it's like over the 50% mark of authenticity within me. That is like, only things that are in alignment are the things that I'm going to even just be able to get myself to do.
Yeah. So beautifully said. And what also like a privilege or an honor to oneself to get to that point of understanding and embodying alignment to that level. Because I think of all the people who are living lives who have had to just shut off to that, right? And go about the status quo because that's what they know or that's what they think they should be doing. And like you said earlier, our bodies, I feel like there's a tripwire in most people where your conscience will start kicking in and the body will start trying to communicate like something needs to change.
And for me in the past, it was this sickness, but I could override the physical. I have a strong will. So I could push myself, whether it was using substances or doing jobs or, having a professional identity, that was, my body was burning out and being sick, but I could push myself hard until the point that I couldn't. And, those were my strong signals. And now it's even stronger to maintain the health. But again, like I said, other people may not have as strong detracting signals to keep themselves in alignment. They may need bigger signals, like some kind of global epidemic to wake them up into living more in alignment, because otherwise things have, and I've said this before, like, if things were going well for me, of course I would have kept doing it. Why wouldn't I? I'm not going to like, oh no, I need to be more authentic and awaken, but like my life is going really great. Like, no, for me, things had to go not so well too. And I think that's the case for everybody to different degrees.
Yeah. And I think you're touching on such an important piece about the 6-2 as well, especially from 30 to 50. And any 6-2s listening to this too, I just really want to encourage you to tune into what alignment feels like for you, because it really is through this process. And what's interesting, Ra calls it like moving through the mutation. And I often think about COVID like this too, Ho'oponopono, but just we know that so many people dealt with that time, just emotionally, mentally, but physiologically very differently, right? And a lot of us got sick. And one of the things that Ross says about the 6-2 in particular, the line 6 in particular, is like, us being in alignment will support us through the mutations that are also happening in our being genetically which will help us to continue on in our lives living with that alignment. Or it's more so like the default of living in alignment will support us in moving through the mutation in a beneficial way. And so just on a really mundane level, that makes so much sense, right? If you keep doing something that's making you sick, what's going to be the end result of that?
Right.
And I feel like for the most part, people will pivot. But say, I don't know, someone's like struggling with substance abuse the majority of their life and they keep going in that direction, that will be the end
That's the path
result
that
of
will
that,
play
you
out.
know?
Like they
Yeah,
they may
exactly.
not, it just may not have been their karmic path to be able to cross over and free themselves fully of the epigenetic conditioning, the ancestral
Yeah,
lineage, and all the trauma that has led
exactly.
them to the point of that level of dependency.
Yes. And thank you for reminding me of that word epigenetic. And so with the 6-2 particularly, or just the line 6 particularly, uh, there are epigenetic factors to us being in alignment. And that's also, I feel like, a very obvious thing too, if we look at epigenetics and our environment or the things that we eat and so on, but also making the correct decisions, which will lead us to the correct trajectory, which will lead us to the correct call for us to be able to share our wisdom and our insight and our guidance once we get off the roof and we're out here with the world, walking our walk and talking our talk and showing people through our being how to do the thing.
It's like it all feeds into itself, right? It's like you can't just and maybe this is specifically a 6-2 thing, but like living in a way that's not healthy or supportive, but then just speaking, sort of valiant, noble truths. Like I feel
Yeah.
like there have been people who have been able to do, like there are many stories of certain uh, Zen masters, and Chogyam Trungpa is one. He was like having sex with his students and doing
Oh,
coke,
wow.
but he
Yeah.
actually had a very powerful vibration and a very powerful energy. And what he would say is,
Yeah.
you can't be like me. You can't, because
Wow.
like,
Okay.
and it sounds
This
like
is
such
honest.
hypocrisy. Sounds like such hypocrisy. But from my experience with his teachings, it's like he really did hold a vibration, and he was like very human. But
Yeah.
I wonder if that time might be, and for the time of those teachers might be ending, because at least
Yeah.
for me, and maybe for the 6-2 in particular, there has to be an alignment of how we, for that level of role modeling, like the health that we embody is going to be the only kind of wisdom that we're able to share. Like I can't teach things that I'm not embodying. And again, maybe
Mm-hmm.
other people can, I don't know, but it certainly
Mm-hmm.
seems like that level of authenticity is required. And
Yeah.
that part of the revelations of this time, of like, especially like people who are considered spiritual teachers or give positive messages, the revelations of their shadows,
Yeah,
is,
totally.
again, like, it's not to say, oh, those people were evil all along. They're just human
Yeah.
beings. But I think
Yeah.
that may be happening to bring us all into a deeper level of authenticity and embodiment, so
Mm-hmm.
we can walk that walk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also the personal responsibility and ownership of the shadows too, you know? Because yeah, no humans are perfect. And I also believe that there are messages and codes for other people that maybe they need to hear at whatever point in time that the individual isn't able to fully embody. But I think at a minimum, you have to really truly believe in what you're saying. And then there has to be an intention to uh, strive for that level of truth in whatever it is. And then also the realness of like changing our minds about things too, right? We see this with spiritual teachers and leaders and gurus of like, or politicians too, right? It's like, okay, I did believe this thing, but now I see upon gathering more information that this is actually truer. And letting that also be a part of the whole process. I also think there is something to just also sharing the right thing at the right time that sometimes goes beyond, how do I say this? It's almost like the Matrix is sharing like a very particular download for someone. An example of like I was literally at Capitol Park like 7 years ago, and there was this homeless person who walked by, and he said he shared a sentence with me, and I was like, he knew exactly what I needed to hear at that point in time. So the point I'm making is there are so many different ways that insight and guidance and messages can come true or come through for people as well. And of course, like the people that we do look up to as leaders and gurus, a certain level of integrity is important. And I'm learning, like, especially a lot of these older ones from the past few generations, especially traditional gurus, there's still so much shadow. Like Osho was a great example of that. A lot of shadow
Yeah.
human energy,
And
very
it's like, I think for me, like, it's honoring the complexity of the human
yeah.
experience, right? And that's where no one's
Mm-hmm.
on a pedestal. Even if they have great wisdom, it doesn't discount their
Yeah.
wisdom to have shadows.
Yeah.
Um,
Well said.
and it doesn't discount their shadows to have wisdom. It's like, you know, so integrity doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean not having
Yeah.
shadows. It just means, I think, being as authentic and humble as we can to the
Yeah.
true spiritual path. And, you know, power and fame and accolades are difficult, I think. No one is immune to the impacts of that.
Yeah,
They
that's very true.
corrode integrity. That's kind of what they do by nature. So it's like,
Mm,
you know, maybe this next chapter of the world will make it a little easier on us
mm,
to navigate some of the traps of fame, because I think
yeah.
it's becoming more apparent that it's like actually not that great to be famous.
Uh-huh.
And so I
Uh-huh.
think maybe, I
That's
mean, I
true
think
too.
there are still plenty of people who worship it and strive for it. But I think for many, there's like a waking up to like, wow, it kind of sucks to be a celebrity. And like, you know, and it's like maybe
Yeah.
um disillusioning us and stripping the romanticizing quality, romantic quality of it, to be like, they really are just other people. They may have
Yeah.
gifts that apply to be entertaining or whatever, or have
Uh-huh.
wisdom. But they really are just other people. And
Yeah.
that level of clarity may help all of us just honor our own shadows, not strive to be perfect, and not feel like we
Totally.
need to pretend to be perfect just to share a
Hmm.
message.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we're seeing this too in like social media, right? How there's just such a wide range of people who maybe don't have the standard celebrity, I don't know, Hollywood kind of vibe,
Right.
um, getting more attention. But I think that there's also like a level of authenticity. So it's not so much about status that's as important. It's more like authenticity. What is this person offering? Which will always still come with projections or judgments and love, and maybe some pedestalizing. But it's up to the individual to maintain that humility, that level of humility.
Yeah, and you know, we might say like the currency moving forward may be authenticity, and like the
Mm,
currency of recognition, you know, and like you said, it's more of that freedom outside the system, TikTokers, whatever, people blowing up who are, you know, wouldn't have necessarily reached that level of fame through traditional methods of Hollywood or whatever, are able to just reveal themselves through YouTube or whatever. It's a freer, more Wild West platform, and that has its
yeah.
consequences, but also has
Uh-huh.
its benefits to allow different shapes and colors and sizes of people to become known. I think it also brings very quickly into view the challenges of that level of
Hmm.
notoriety. Like blowing up on
Yeah.
a rocket ship from a viral TikTok is going to change your life, and I think show
Oh,
that
yeah.
person, you know, be careful what you wish for. Like you wanted to be famous,
Yeah.
congratulations. Now everyone knows who you are, everyone is following what you're saying, and as many people are
Yeah.
benefiting from you, there's going to be people who are tearing you down. And like that's, I think, what anyone who is achieving it, whether it comes to more traditional systems or outside the norm ways, will come to experience. And I think the lesson for everyone navigating that will be to stay in alignment, because if you're in alignment and
Mm.
you're in your authentic
Yes.
truth, then you'll be willing to keep creating and doing things, and it will support your health. You won't burn out doing it.
Yeah.
regardless of if the rocket ship of accolades and fame continues to come your way. But it's tempting, and it would be challenging for anyone to. It would be hard for anyone, I think, to ignore suddenly getting millions of followers where you had none, and then feeling like you can't lose that, or that's your source of income, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think those will be the challenges. Everyone, um, seeking that any degree of exposure will be navigating. Which, in a way, I've thought about. Anytime you do anything online, whether you have 5 or 5 million followers on Instagram, when you post something, you are seeking exposure. And I think that honoring that is useful. Like, it doesn't mean you're trying to be a celebrity, but you are seeking exposure, whether you're doing it. And there's so many ways we can rationalize that and be like, no, it's just for my business, or it's just for my family or friends. Fine, but you're seeking exposure. Otherwise, you wouldn't put it out there, because you're not just doing it for you. So
totally, yeah. That's just like wanting to be seen or wanting to share. Yeah.
And if we can just be honest with that, and it just helps us. And I think, again, to the point of whether it's the 6-2 or just the sensitivity in me, I tend to learn those lessons kind of harshly or quickly, because, like, even just through doing this past year brought me super deep into alignment, where I'd been pushing more toward exposure and thinking that that's how my business was going to thrive and whatever. And then my body was just like, no, this isn't working. This is not, you're burning out, and so, it's continuously realigning for me about why I do this, when I do it, how I do it, all that kind of stuff.
A couple different things come to mind when you were sharing that. I hear what you're saying on the nuance of justifying the seeking exposure part. And when I think about the whole 6-2 thing, because the 2 line is a hermit, it wants to crawl into its cave and like not have to deal with all of this stuff that comes with being a human, right? And human life crap. But it's also here to share when correct. I said the transpersonal karma, although we maybe want to go sometimes sit in an ashram or on a hill or just on a beach chair in the Bahamas, our karmic purpose is contingent upon other people. And although that can be personally, like what's around us, our family and stuff, now with the digital world, I mean, we connected because you found my blog online. You know what I mean? If the internet, this interweb wasn't here, there's so many.
Yeah, and exposure isn't inherent and is not an inherently negative thing.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And so one really cool thing about this, like Web 2, as we move into 2027, we move out of the process of planning to the sleeping phoenix, there is an emphasis on moving away. We can see this already from the traditional nuclear family dynamic of like having to be so entangled karmically or otherwise with family, to finding our soul family, our fractal family.
Totally.
The people who can actually hear us. And
we may need to be seen in order to, and others may, others may need to be seen so we can find them.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple things to add to that. I think with this whole shift and how the individual shares itself with the world in order to bring in resources and exchange resources, finances, that's a big piece of the internet world, and people going viral, or even like just using social media or podcasts or whatever, as a form to put ourselves out there. And one thing too about the 6-2, which I realized from my own experience, and this came from like probably applying for a handful of jobs. There's this feature on LinkedIn, if you're not familiar, where it's called Easy Apply. So you have your resume and everything up there, and there are jobs that have Easy Apply enabled. So you can look at the job posting and click on Easy Apply, and it'll send your resume. Out of all of the Easy Applies that I did, to how randomly a recruiter from Indeed found my resume and reached out to me for this role that I'm in, this contract role. I feel like that's the epitome of the 6-2 energy of like being seen and being called out. And I've noticed the majority of opportunities, even when I was teaching in Bali, um, for that school in New York, they reached out to me for the opportunity. And so it's such a fine line. This is where I feel like correctness is so important, because you can create something without any intent of anything happening to it, but something will, it'll create an opportunity for you to be found and seen, which creates a ripple effect. So even like that, those medium threads that I did, that was me just being excited and wanting to share about human design. And so I did it. I didn't think it was going to get all these views or whatever was going to happen to it, right? Which connected us, which created another chain. So I'm just saying all this
Yeah, I
to
found your
emphasize.
writing and I was like, wow, I love this. And I reached out
Yeah,
and that was
thanks.
it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's the nuance, right? Of
Hmm.
exposure isn't inherently bad, it's not inherently negative. I think it's helpful to be conscious of it,
Yeah.
of our intentions, but I
Yeah.
think there can be many reasons for us doing that, for us expressing
Hmm.
ourselves, for us, feeling called to be seen, wanting to be seen. And I think some of the nuance, some of the points that especially for me personally, that
Uh-huh.
are helpful to tease out are like, are we doing this um, for monetary success? At least primarily for and when I was pushing my creative outputs with a sense of financial success in mind, I
Hmm.
was totally burning out, and there was a
Hmm.
lot more stress and pressure in my nervous system.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that
Totally.
that can't be a part of an aligned part of the equation either. I think
Hmm.
all of this stuff can be aligned. It just depends.
Hmm.
But I think there are helpful things to tease out within ourselves around the intention. Like, is this quote unquote business focused? How much of this is just sharing my light and trusting?
Yeah.
Can I share my light, you know, um, with an open sense that others may find it and pull me into a new job opportunity, a
Hmm.
career opportunity? Can I just be
Hmm.
doing this for the potentiality of being drawn into something without the
Yeah.
expectation that
That
it
piece.
definitely does that, right? That it definitely
Yeah.
lands me the dream
It
job,
has to. Yeah.
right? And
It
that's I think,
must.
that really delicate crux of having dreams without attachment. This
Totally.
is them coming true.
Yeah. Totally. And like honoring those desires without the, yeah, it's almost like this staticky frequency, the way that I describe it. That reading that I told you I got, his name's Mark Germain, by the way. I recommend him. He's hilarious. But one of the things he said to kind of help me discern correctness, he's like, you'll feel when the frequency's a little like, and I'm like, oh, as soon as he said that, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And that doesn't mean I don't still feel it in moments, but I can be conscious of whether it's like my anxiety or my nervousness or just something that's more momentary. And then, the next day I'll engage with whatever again, and it'll feel like, okay, this feels clear, right? It's like moving through the energy versus when it's really the mind trying to just run off with something, and this whole frequency is a little like, ugh, which the majority of the time I don't really even get into that sort of thing. Um, but to add to what you're saying about the pressure, especially when it comes to resources to make money, and like this thing has to make X amount or whatever, it takes away from being in that state of naturalness, which especially 6-2s, like the two line where pros at. Like literally, it's this, we have the capacity to be naturals at certain things where other people maybe would have to work harder or would have to further educate themselves or just would don't understand how we know to do the thing. And so continuing to lean towards whatever that is, and even sharing or allowing exposure when it's correct. So it's kind of like another question he gave me, which is phenomenal. Although he didn't say it like this is what I gathered. Is this going to bring me satisfaction? Right? Even if it's some mundane, random, go for a walk across the block, like, am I going to feel a sense of satisfaction? And although that can also seem like hedonistic or like, oh, you're just looking for pleasure, no, it's us. harnessing our energy and cultivating it towards something that's going to continue to feed us rather than drain us.
Yeah, and I think continuing to be able to tune into that, it's not only is it not just like hedonistic or self-serving or whatever, that's the compass that we need, because without that compass, we're lost and we're just playing other people's games and what
Yeah.
other people think are bright and shiny. And to your
Uh-huh.
point
The
about
headship.
having to ride our own emotional waves, like I think that's our work, right? Is to continue to recognize where we're being pulled, what the mind is, because it's humbling. I am no expert at this. I have all my own
Mm-hmm.
ambitions, ego, desires, hopes and
Mm-hmm.
disappointments, things. It's just that I'm practicing to the best of my ability, and
Yeah.
the universe is being quite strict with me, I will say, is and Saturn
Saturn.
is making
Yeah.
me sort of follow what's really in alignment. Otherwise, things aren't
Yeah.
working out well. So, that's just me personally, but I think for all of us and for those emotional authority people, like, yeah, I'll continue to be humbled as many times as I need to get caught up in the emotionality of what I desire, of what I wish for, of what the mind wants. But like you said, when you wake up that one day and you feel cleaner, I mean,
Mm.
in your energy, and you just see it a bit more clearly and a bit more neutrally, like that, it almost feels really worth it every time. Having as hard as the wave is, when you get that day where you're like, oh, I feel better now. I feel a little cleaner now. Like
Yeah.
it, and it just helps every time you just see that riding
Yeah.
it out, waiting it out, it will bring you to a cleaner, more neutral place to make a decision. And it has helped me because I have been a very impulsive person throughout my life. I've just had really intense reactivity and energy. And this practice and just my own maturation process has really helped me see the benefit of just pausing. As much as I just want to grab something while it's right there or push a little harder, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, there's so much benefit toward writing things out.
Totally.
Well, we've been going. We've been going
We
for, as
have.
usual, as I expected.
I
We've been going for quite a
know.
while.
Yeah.
Um, this might be a natural place for us to begin to shift or wind down, or I'll just open it up. If there's anything else that's coming through to you that you'd like to speak to or bring up, or round out this wide-ranging conversation of ours.
I think I would just love to emphasize for everyone, whether you believe in human design or not, whether you even believe in astrology or whatever your spiritual relationship is with reality, um, I just want to emphasize the importance of really tuning in to what it means to discern what your truth is and what feels like a yes for you. Especially as we're just moving through all these global changes the next few years, definitely the past few years, but as it amplifies, people being as centered as they possibly can amongst chaos is gonna be like the healing balm, the sustaining balm for ourselves as individuals, for our communities, for the people around us, family members, um, but also for the world. And just a reminder, too, regardless of what happens in 2027 and beyond, the importance of understanding correctness and how it'll help us to keep on keeping on, regardless of what's happening. And so it's just, yeah, I just feel this it's excitement, a little bit of pressure, right? Too, it's like I have the 5432, this pressure to support people in their evolution, but also just everyone trusting their own timing of it. I always feel like there's often like this categorization or like this checklist of like being spiritual or what you need to do or what you need to know. Like, forget all of that and just I want to encourage people to really tune into their hearts and tune into their bodies and just tune into like what experiencing love within themselves and what sharing that love with others feels like and letting that be the first and primary thing. Because I think beyond whatever frameworks and religions and ideologies that the mind wonderfully, projects and we get to experience and talk about, of course, there's always something deeper that connects each and every one of us to our truth on a very non-linear analytical way. And it, I feel, is the connection with our body and our being, and even the spirituality, the other realms, dimensions, whatever, that can be accessed through that place.
Amen. And it may be like paradoxical, even as we speak about human design, that which is a very conceptual thing, that moving forward, it's really not about the conceptual stuff at all. And there are an infinite amount of brands of spirituality, but if there's any message that I'm feeling for myself personally, and that I feel guided to share as well, is that it's about following your own, whether you call it heart or design or gut response, or just really tuning in to what is authentic and real for you, even if it doesn't match with someone else's standard or expectation of you, whether that is spiritually or politically or otherwise. It's not about the concepts. It's not about the intellect as much. It's not about the mind as much as it is about what the body, what the so-called inner child, what you need, and the permission to give ourselves that, to the extent, to the reasonable extent that it's not hurting other people or whatever.
Yes.
But, there's nuance to that too. So I think for all of us, especially those of us that may feel sometimes, including myself in this, a kind of superiority about the way that I think or see the world and my worldview.
Yeah, totally.
It's continuously humbling to be like, oh, my body actually needs to eat meat, or my body needs to do things that like I might have thought were not quote unquote aligned or good or made me look good or whatever. And it's like, oh, that doesn't matter. That's not, there's a higher perspective, but there's also this body that I'm living in and having to take care of and doing the best I can with. So I think, regardless of the perspective, including human design, it's learning to trust yourself to the best of your ability. Well, Trishana, as expected, this was yet another incredible conversation that took us hours deep into all things,
as usual.
As usual, and probably won't be the last. But I'm glad we finally got the chance to do this again, and I trust it will serve all who are meant to receive it as I expose it to the world.
Yes, as you share it.
As I share it.
As you share through exposure.
I share it. And so, as usual, I'll post your links and everything in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to say about where people can find you, if you'd like them to, or anything else you got going on?
You can find me on IG at LightRay, one word. And as of now, I think that's it. Oh, a kind of unrelated thing, but also kind of cool, which is feels like very 6'2" for me to even share this. I am releasing some very beautiful music that me and my co-creators are really happy with, which will be coming out soon. I'll send you the pre-save link once we get that. So
I love that.
If you can add that, that would be wonderful. I'm really, really excited about sharing it with the world.
Love supporting creativity, especially music, and that's so cool that you're doing that.
Yeah,
so
feels
totally
such
supportive.
Like a blessing.
Yeah. Alrighty then. Well, until next time.
Yes, thank you again for creating this space.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review anywhere you listen. And if you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out on Instagram or my website at drdanielatkins.com. I offer individual consultations as well as group workshops, both virtually and in person, depending on my whereabouts. And I am always open to collaboration. Until then, may you be the vessel for your highest vision. Blessings for the ride.